Hello, hello.
Okay.
Little selfie shot going on. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Corder. I'm the Vice President of Faith and Performance for Diversified. We're a global integrator. We work with faith organizations all over the country. Very excited to have the chance to host a conversation today. To the best of our knowledge, this is one of the first times this has happened at NAB. So if you have the chance to provide feedback to the show that you appreciated what we did, that certainly will help us in the future. Hopefully do more of these things next year. Excited to have the panel in front of us today. For introductions, let's start with, we only have 45 minutes, so we're going to move pretty quick through this. Just know, there's not going to be time for Q&A that we're going to officially make into this. However, this is the last session that's happening in this stage before lunch break. So there's about an hour afterwards, and all of us are going to be available to be able to talk and to catch up, and we can deep dive on some things, through that time. So, can we start and introduce our panel? Geoff, why don't you go first? And let's just work our way around, and everybody introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Geoff Lee. I'm the Director of Education and Product Specialization at AbelCine. That means I just basically get to play with cool toys and teach people how to use them.
Hi, my name's Geoff Smith, and I'm a technology specialist at AbelCine with a specialty in color pipelines.
Hi, I'm Isabelle King. I am one of the video broadcast directors at Gateway Church, and I help manage the camera team.
Hi, I'm Austen Varian. I'm the creative director for our live production team. So anything visual related.
I'm Tyler Tritten. I am the technical director at Transformation Church. And, if it's got an electronic pulse, I help make it work.
I'm Chad Megan. Yep. People. So much so I'm thinking of naming my kids Cam 1 and Cam 2. That'd be nice. But broadcast video director at Transformation Church.
Excellent. So thank you everyone for being with us today. We're going to split today's conversation kind of into two main topics. The first topic we're going to talk about is some of the vision behind why cinematic, and what does cinematic mean to all of our contributors today. And then we're going to take the second half of the conversation and kind of talk about what's the most innovative, what's the most paradigm-changing thing that has come in your world that's affected how you're doing cinematic video. As a means of getting started, just in case, not assuming that everyone in the room knows both of these churches, I asked them to provide us just a short little clip from each of them of some worship content and then some message content. So let's start with, I'm going to show you about 30 seconds of Gateway's worship, and then I'm going to show you about 30 seconds of their message.
Beautiful.
You're checking the stock market on your phone every 45 minutes, and you read your Bible every 14 days. This turns into a desire, and it goes into your shopping cart. And you might say, hey, I have not been financially immoral. I have not sinned. No, but you get it by now. You have allowed a desire, a strong dominant thought in your shopping cart that will produce sin if undealt with.
So that's Gateway Church. How about that? So now let's look at Transformation Church. We're going to do the same thing, about 30 seconds of a music moment, and then we're going to do 30 seconds of some message.
You're telling me this isn't the same church?
That's not the race. I mean, take some pictures, but that's not the race. I mean, walk in your friend's show, but that's not the race. I mean, model, do it, but it won't fulfill you because I'm not saying you can't do it, but just make sure after you ran that practice round that don't count, still have energy to run your race. So many people are tired because they are running races that are not actually qualified.
How about that?
So I want to open up the conversation with asking a really big question. Cinematic is, we're talking today about cinematic innovation. Cinematic means lots of different things to lots of different people. Can you talk a little bit about the vision for you of what does cinematic mean and why do you focus, why should we care about cinematic? I'm just going to open it up to the table.
I'll go. You want to go?
I was just going to take Jeff's words, but you go.
For me, I've always wanted a way for the people at home to feel what it's like in the room. And for the people in the room, actually, for us, we put iMag on screen. In the room, we put our program feed on iMag. So I wanted them to feel what it was like if they were actually on stage for the people that's in the room. Like, I want to be on stage worshiping with the worship team, right? Which is an all-encompassing experience. I mean, if you see our, with that clip, our lighting, everything cohesively comes into one. And, so with that, was how do we make it look different from traditional broadcasts? Okay, let's start shooting a little bit more cinematically. Let's start adding a little bit more movement to what we're doing. Let's really follow the pace of the song. Is it fast? Is it slow? Slow it down. Fast. Let's pick it up. Let's make some movements. We utilize various techniques to do so. And within that, it has been not only a great way for the people at home to feel like they're actually there, but it's also, even for our own team, it's been said like, man, we feel like we're breaking the wall between production and what's happening in the room. And we're actually able to actually get in and worship. We're actually able to be a part of the service and even feel more, like we're actually contributing to something more, if that makes sense. And that's been one of the biggest things for me. That for me is the cinematic piece of it, right? Again, it all comes down to heart and loving the Lord and wanting to worship through your craft. But yeah.
Isabelle, what about you?
Yeah, to go off of that, I think it's all about connecting people with people. I feel like, at least from my experience with how we've done it in the past, is focusing on one person. And, but now in a season where we're trying to capture that emotion and that real authentic worship. And, worship is so vulnerable when you're attending church. Like, you don't want cameras in your face and stuff like that. But like, it helps the online people that's not in the room kind of feel the impact of what the Holy Spirit is doing, in and through us there, and feeling like they're a part of that community rather than, just watching the worship leader and looking at drums. But yeah.
Well, Geoff, from a technical perspective, what is cinematic? What are some of the challenges that, in what they're talking about of trying to communicate that spirit, that emotion, why this move towards large sensor format cameras, towards, color depth of field, and just all of these different things? Talk a little bit about that from a technical perspective.
Sure. I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question because certainly we have a very advanced audience these days. They know what they like. They've seen all their movies and such. But what I think the heart of the question and maybe the answer is being able to deliver a product that looks a lot like the content that they're already familiar with. Utilizing some of these tools to depth of field is often one of the most cited examples, because you can use that as a tool to draw your audience's eyes to where you want on a frame. Right? You see these big grand vistas, wide establishing shots. A lot of it is how you guys cut too, is you cut in a way that a traditional director might, right? Extreme wide or extreme close up, establishing shot, like use that same language and parlance. But the main thing about it is being able to take what is traditionally a cinema based camera, where you have a large cinema crew, cinema lenses, but then injecting it into a live broadcast environment, which oftentimes are two different parts of the equation, and being able to seamlessly blend that is part of the art and the craft. I would say certainly challenge is definitely one of the main ones, is probably focus. I think we'd all agree with when you have a razor edge with a focus and you have dynamic speakers, and you have maybe volunteers on cameras, that's certainly a big part of it. And this is not a knock at all, by the way, on church, because professional ACs and camera operators who've been doing this for, card carrying members who've been doing this, union members who've been doing this for decades also struggle the same way. So, but it's just being able to deliver that message, in a maybe more impactful and sort of meaningful way.
So for the four of you from Gateway and Transformation, who do you look to for inspiration? One of the things that's most striking to me in the clips that we saw is both are at an incredibly high level, right? They both look beautiful. They look like, they could just as easily be a Netflix show, right? But they're so different from each other. And that's one of the things that is the most striking to me is you each have your own DNA as a church and as a director and as a creative director and as a technical director. You each have your own DNA that you're representing of your organization. Who are you guys looking to for inspiration?
I would say what's cool about cinematic is that spectrum is huge. I mean, you could be Top Gun or you could be Blade Runner. You could be as moody as it gets. You could be action as it gets. You're Blade Runner. Just kidding. You're Top Gun. But I think that's what makes it cool, is that there is no inspiration for the church. It's inspiration to you. So for us, that's the Holy Spirit. One, where is the Holy Spirit moving in our room? And that's what's inspiring what to capture. As far as style and mood, I would say there hasn't really been a benchmark for us. It's really been what is happening in our home and how do I, spend some sort of effort to make that feeling come through the frame.
So hang on. So you're not just looking at some other church and saying, oh, I want it to look like Bethel or, fill in the blank, whoever. You just said some pretty big words that I want to make sure we hone back on, that you're paying attention to what Holy Spirit is doing in your church, in your room, how it's moving. And that's really inspiring a lot of the direction of what we see as the end result.
Yeah, I would say like back in the old school broadcast era, you would just look to TV, the best of TV, the Super Bowl, whatever, and that would be your mark. I think what makes, y'all's clips, our clips even feel differently than some other churches is that we're not copying anyone. We're using a lot of tech that we don't even know how to use. With partners like Abel, like, hey, here's what we feel inspired to do. Can you guys help us capture this in a way that brings people in? So, yeah.
Transformation guys, how would you answer this question? Who are you looking to for inspiration?
I mean, it's big on what these guys have already said. One, when we look at the live broadcast, I think one of the emphasis on the traditional sense is viewership. Let me show you what's happening. And then when we look at cinematic, we have narrative storytelling. Like in worship, in the message, we are telling stories and we're inviting people into that story. And so we go to this cinematic look. Two of the big, ones that I looked at was not Top Gun and Blade Runner, but it was, Whiplash and A Star is Born. Whiplash has some really great cinematic movements that that story is crazy and it just pulls you in. And that's kind of right. We want to pull people into that story. And so we were looking at, okay, what are some cinematic benchmarks? And then, at the end of the day, we really believe we have the greatest story ever told, the gospel. And so it's how do we partner with that message? How do we partner with the vision of the house? And even down to color science, what does it look like to repeat and help tell that story?
I love that. Chad, anything you'd want to add to that?
No, right now I'm just watching a lot of Blippi and Miss Rachel. So, my 16 months. Loves cooking. No, Austen said it. What works for us in our stream, per se, right? A stream, our river, is what works. And it's what we're called to, the people that we're called to reach. What works for Gateway is for the people that they are called to reach. Everything flows. We were talking about this last night. Everything, all these rivers, all of our different churches and it's streams that stream into one ocean, the capital C church. And so the biggest thing is that what works for us may not work for you and your leadership team, but you can find inspiration through the Holy Spirit to actually make really, just amazing cinematic pieces with worship and services.
So piggybacking off of that, I've asked, what's your biggest source of inspiration? From a creative perspective, let's not talk tech, let's talk creative and vision. What's your biggest challenge right now?
Agreeing on what cinematic is.
Say more.
Even within our own group, we all sit down from leadership all the way across the board, and we're like, okay, do we want it to look like this or do we want it to look like this? And okay, the black levels are here, but are we going here? And wait, okay, the exposure was okay here. It is just a constant redefining of, okay, how do we bring this post-production look that people are familiar with and apply that every Sunday service, and bring that level of excellence and being that sharp. And so honestly, that's I think that's one of at least our biggest conversations is, okay, what does it mean to be cinematic, even just within our bubble?
Austen, I'd like to come back to you. You said something in passing that I think a lot of us can resonate with when you said we're using tools that we're figuring out as we go, and sometimes we don't even know what we're doing. Yeah. Speak a little bit more to that.
Sure. ENG, like broadcast world, what you depended on was the robustness of that tech. And so a lot of people, most of your camera team, most of your directors were not industry experts, were not technology experts, but the system was designed by one. And so you could depend on it. The cinematic, I would say that even answers your second question. What's our biggest challenge is, the constant moderation of that equipment, the moving around. Well, I don't like this focal length for this type of service. I'm going to move this lens. Well, now I don't have lens control. All that kind of stuff really impacts your team when you're, maybe you're not even volunteer, but you're part-timers, you have a wide pool of people that want to involve themselves in the church. That means it's not on one person to maintain that equipment. So we don't have DPs. We don't have, ACs on staff. We got Isabelle and a bunch of camera operators. So maintaining that stuff is definitely a big challenge, but worth it.
Which I'll tell you, just sidebar in this, if you are a fan of these guys' work like I am, make sure and follow Isabelle and Chad on Instagram if you're not already, because both of them are commonly posting multi-viewer shots, clips with comm, and it's so interesting to me as a viewer how different your styles are, but to hear your passion, and especially as you talk about this vision behind it, I know I see that as I watch your clips, Isabelle, when you share, an impactful moment and you get to kind of see behind the curtain of how you were coaching your volunteers. Talk a little bit about that, because obviously one of the biggest challenges I would think that you also face is, you're not using professional camera operators and DPs, and you're using architects and realtors and teachers during the week who come and volunteer. What does that journey look like as far as helping, you guys are at the mercy of the people that are actually behind the camera, right? So what does that journey look like for developing your team and ultimately helping them accomplish, understand the vision and accomplish the vision?
Yeah, like you said, most of our operators, part-time and volunteer, did not start because they were so passionate about camera. They just wanted to be in community, and they saw something just by attending and wanted to get involved. And at the beginning of our weekends, before we start anything, we're able to kind of sit them down and go over the direction and the vision for the weekend, so we're all on the same page, and then also understand where we're all coming through or coming into. during the week, like, stuff happens. And so being able to minister and pour into each other before starting really helps us posture our hearts. And then we go into showing clips from the previous week and helping inspire them, helping them see the vision and see where we're going to posture and just be expectant that the Holy Spirit is going to move in and through this upcoming weekend. So just kind of trying to communicate everything as much as possible. I mean, I know me and Austen and other full-timers in leadership kind of collaborate throughout the week. And so that's just making sure that we collaborate and with the camera team as well and just communicate that same vision so nothing's really getting lost. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm way better behind a camera than in front of.
We're so thankful for your insight today. Chad, anything you'd add to that?
No, yeah. Everything she said, I think the biggest thing for me has always been never wanting to create a amazing video team, production team, what have you may, but create a family. So creating a way to create a safe place for one, them to feel super included, right? But also they're volunteers. So it's a live environment. There's bound to happen. Mistakes are bound to happen, right? And so having them be okay with that, I found has kind of opened up the world and opened up their eyes to like, oh, okay, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, I'm not going to be, sat down for a while. I'm not going to be, discouraged by somebody going, what's wrong with you? What happened? I do that to Tyler all the time, though. But
gets me going though.
Yeah. So creating that safe place and making sure that we're taking time to take prayer requests, to ask them, hey, do you have a praise report? Do you have a prayer request? What can we do to partner with you in this season of your life? And because a lot of them, they're taking time, they could be on their way to church, get a flat tire or, but they still show up. And without them, honestly, we wouldn't be able to do stuff that we can do right now. So, yeah.
I have one more question to piggyback off of this from a visionary perspective. How do you interface? One of the things that's striking to me about what you guys both just shared is how, because you've done prep work, this is my words, not yours. I'm reinterpreting it. Because you've done the prep ahead of time on Sunday, on Saturday, you have made intentional space to be able to pour into your team, to be able to help them understand the vision. So they're coming with you for that whole journey, right? What does that partnership look like between you and leadership? When we talk about, Tyler, you kind of alluded to it a little bit of how it's a constantly moving target of like, what is our end result to look like? Well, what does it look like to partner with your senior leaders? You both have leadership teams that I'm sure have opinions as well. And, I think I'm asking for some, I'm hoping that maybe we can all take away some advice of just how we can interact with our leaders in a more effective way to make sure that, you've all talked about how you're serving the vision of the house. What does that look like practically? Do you interface with your senior leaders very often? Do they speak into what you're doing?
I would say if you wait for them to say anything, you already lost. So if you wait for them to say, I don't like this or this is what I want, either way, you're behind. So I think, we all up here could express what we feel like has been captured in the room a bunch of different ways. I've seen the guys work at this table and none of it looks like what the clips you just showed. So clearly that's aligning our skills with the vision of the house, but that means you have to capture the vision of the house first. So I think that's asking really good questions, offering a lot of examples like, hey, I like this. The 20-year-olds at our church are going to like this. The 65-year-olds at our church are going to like this. To Jeff's point, stuff they've already experienced in other forms, right? So a lot of it's offering that up and saying, hey, here's my suggestion. Which direction can we go and how do we, take tiny steps to get there? You'll probably gain a lot of trust with that, with your leadership. Maybe even be able to advocate for what you would like because you're starting the conversation, not them. If you wait and react, you're probably going to end up serving something that they don't even want because they don't know how to articulate what they want. And you're going to be really disappointed in yourself.
So, I'm curious to ask an open-ended question that, I think Geoff Smith, I would ask you to be the first to weigh in on. Sure. We've talked quite a bit about the vision behind cinema. I think what the audience might be most interested in is we're here at the largest broadcast show in the world. There's gear everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. There's switchers everywhere. In your worlds collectively, and I'm going to have Geoff start, but then I'd like you guys to talk about this as well. What has been the most transformative thing that has affected the quality of what we see and affected how you storytell and how you're translating? You know, we're kind of taking a turn and moving into more of again, some practical around the tech. Geoff?
Sure. I think, just the ever falling prices and more accessibility to, more and more sophisticated cameras that have the capabilities that we associate with, you know, the very height of the equipment pyramid, you know, the most sophisticated cinema cameras. Much of that technology, even if it's not as convenient or easy to use as it is in, you know, the most sophisticated equipment, exists to greater or lesser extents in equipment packages at all different budgets and all different levels of capability. And being able to bring, you know, our experience of how to exploit that to empowering and enriching the visual experience with the folks at these churches is, you know, it's really inspiring, and it makes you want to, you know, dig into the details and create a solution on the fly sometimes that's very specific to that environment. Yeah, that's my kind of take on it.
So Tyler, get even more practical.
Yeah.
What in the last year do you think has made the biggest impact on the quality of what we saw when we looked at your clips?
So we've taken a couple of steps. We've upgraded our whole system, our camera package and all these things. But recently, we stripped away all of the color grading that is baked inside the cameras, and we've moved to a live LUT, situation. So we're putting a live 3D LUT into the workflow. So all of our cameras are actually set to a log, color space, and then that 3D LUT is being applied after it's in the video plant. And honestly, like I said, we've seen a good leap forward through every step of the way. But this move, it opened up a lot for us. We got so much more latitude. So for lighting, we can be moody in the room when we need to be moody in the room. And the cameras was like, cool, just open up the ND filter. Like we went from being wide open on all the irises, trying to figure out how to get everyone to focus. Like we went from that to, we suddenly have so much more light to play around with. And now we're on like an ND 4 with f-stop 4. And so we got a whole lot just from applying that LUT.
Okay. So you just used some terms that I've been doing this for a long time. And until very recently, when's the last time you heard a live production camera person or broadcast person talk about ND and talk about log, right? That's a post workflow. So you're talking about doing this in a live workflow. Austen, talk a little bit about the journey that you guys have been.
Yeah, I mean, we're similar. We have the same color box, live LUT being placed and live graded, but we're doing it a little different on every camera. So that helps us match cameras live as well. We shoot from a lot of different angles. We have fewer cameras than some churches our size. So that means a very kind of, I would say, dynamic plot, which means a camera might be shooting from this angle and needs some different settings than being shot from another angle. But man, that has really opened the door. Even going back to the leadership conversation, we can iterate like you would in an edit room with a director in post. We can iterate live. We can iterate month over month to say our look is evolving. It's not just what, you know, based on what camera we chose to buy, which used to dictate your style. Now the camera means very little in our system, and it's a lot about the conversations with leadership, and our system that gives us some flexibility. So we're still live grading just like you. And I would say one of the challenges would even be, you know, kind of using post language with a whole live team. Yes, on our team using those terms because we don't know them a lot, but especially with our, you know, collaborators with our worship department or our speakers, you know, they can't dictate that stuff. They can't even, you know, pronounce those words. So we try to stay away from that and use, okay, well, this is the mood. This is the light level type of stuff. but it's a cool opportunity because now we also we have a whole film team at our church that shoots all of our commercials and, our outward facing things. Now we have a knowledge pool with them to gain really great expertise from our in-house DPs and filmmakers, which is really cool. They help educate us in that process. Some of them have even helped us workshop LUTs or workshop looks. It's really cool.
So Geoff Smith, you mentioned as we were introducing, and I didn't stop there, your specialty is as a colorist, right?
Yeah. And a director of photography.
Yeah.
So
speak a little bit into, okay, if our audience is hearing about this for the first time, what does this mean practically? Okay, we've mentioned outputting log from cameras. We've mentioned somebody's throwing out color boxes. We're talking about LUTs.
Yep.
How do we do this in a live world? Because obviously they've been doing this in post for forever, seemingly, in digital cinema, but we're talking about doing this in live world. So how do we do that?
There's a number of different approaches. Two of the main ones would be to have cameras that you can dynamically load and change LUTs by controlling them remotely through a piece of software. Most manufacturers have a first-party, network or Wi-Fi control piece of software. Typically, it's free, and you can, make changes to a bunch of cameras all at once. Or you can, cameras that don't have that capability, don't let that stand in your way. That same functionality can be implemented downstream of the camera somewhere in the broadcast or video engineering infrastructure. So that you can create a lookup table in a piece of free software like the free version of DaVinci Resolve that reflects, that maybe is based on a LUT that your film team has been working with for the linear content posted to social media and other platforms. Take that and modify it to, both bring the look of the branded look of the linear content closer to the live stream content, as well as bring the experience for parishioners in the room closer to the image that is sent out over, your streaming provider of choice.
This is a little bit related. I'm sorry. I just wanted to I think this is important. We use terms like LUT and 3D LUT and CDLs and all that, but I have to be honest, probably a lot of the 30 and unders already know what that means. That's not foreign language, right? Because you could shoot log and raw on your iPhone, and you've probably loaded a LUT that you downloaded from the internet. So this terminology isn't super foreign, but to the 20 and 30-year-olds in the room, what's an RCP? What's the knee point, right? That could be, I might as well be speaking French into a LUT. And then going back to your earlier conversation, a lot of your team are volunteer based, but they're shooting content on their own, whether it's for church or just for fun or with their buddies or whatever. So you now have a bigger pool of people to potentially pull from to say, hey, come work with us on broadcast on Sundays. And they don't have to feel like they're fish out of water when they see giant row of RCPs and don't know what any of the knobs or buttons do. Because I don't know what half of those buttons do. I just pretend. But so how are you expecting your volunteers to know what those buttons do? But they know everything else that we just discussed. So inject them into that, and now you've maybe doubled your workflow, your potential sort of workforce options. So I just had to bring that up.
I'm glad you brought that up because representing an integrator, a project that we just brought online 2 weeks ago in the Bay Area. A couple of them are here in the audience today. And I think one of the most interesting things to me about that system design was that it's a 6 or 7 camera shoot, and there isn't an actual RCP, a remote control panel, that in the typical way we would think of. There isn't one in the system, right? Because once we embrace this live workflow, we think about video differently, don't we? Transformation guys, how would you speak to your journey through this process?
We're still on it. This weekend we recently did version 12.
And when did you start?
Gosh, November?
Yeah.
Yeah, back in November. So yeah, it's
5 months, 6 months. Right.
I would say it's both. One of the things for sure what Austen was talking about is the constant communication with leadership is key. Like constant. Hey, how does this look? Is this cool? Okay, you want us to dial it back? Is that good? All that stuff. And so that's what, we're on version 12. We're trying to figure out that sweet spot still. As you saw in the clips, right? Our lighting is dynamic. Our shot style is dynamic, and that changes every Sunday. And so for us, it's where's the best kind of medium spot? Where's that sweet spot we can land in where skin tones look great? Where, cause I think was version 7 or something. Pastor Mike looked amazing. Yeah. And then we get Pastor Will coming up, who's a white guy, and he's completely red. And they're like, oh, okay, we gotta dial that back.
We did not test this out.
So it's just finding that spot, and that's, that honestly, it's fun. I'll admit, man, it is fun to be able to do this for a live environment where we can actually, future dreams down the road. Hey, what if in the middle of the song we go to this, sepia? No, never. But if we go to this color, what if we change this to kind of make this pop just a little bit for this song, So, yeah.
So I'm also curious, Tyler, can you speak a little bit more? So you mentioned log and outputting log into the system, and then you mentioned ND filters and iris. So I think probably most of our audience is used to thinking of iris of the camera, of the lens, really being used to control the level of the light that's coming into the sensor. But you just described using ND filters and iris. What's the difference between those two in your workflow?
Right. So whatever my iris is at, it's going to affect a few things, right? Hopefully we're somewhat familiar with the exposure triangle. It's all light. It affects our depth of field. And what we kind of talked about earlier is this narrative storytelling cinematic is usually akin to a narrower depth of field. But if we're bringing our iris back to a higher f-stop level to control lighting, we start losing that quality. So now we can flip over to ND filters instead, which is really just like really cool sunglasses for your camera, right? That's the scientific,
Really cool sunglasses for your camera. That's
awesome. And so that's not going to be affecting, your depth of field. So we can keep our irises open, as big as we want. Lord willing, focus is sharp. And there we go. We have it.
And I just want to also say, the utility of ND filters is hard to understate because cameras today they're so sensitive to light. They have multiple base ISOs or base sensitivities. Some have 2, some have 3. But your lenses may not all share a common definition of what wide open is. They might not all open to a T2.8 or even a T4. And the use of ND and a high sensitivity can really help you even things out.
So, another buzzword that I hear quite a bit about, and transformation guys, I know you guys kind of pioneered this for a lot of people, is high dynamic range. Can you speak a little bit about what the journey has been like? Well, first of all, let's define high dynamic range so we make sure that we're all in a common language. And then I'd love in some of our last few minutes to talk just real quickly about what that journey has been. What's been some of the pros? Why did you do it? And what have been some of the challenges that you've done that? Cause I'm sure a lot of us at the show, you're hearing lots about high dynamic range. Talk a little bit about that. First of all, what is high dynamic range? What does that mean? I'm looking.
Sure. All right. Great.
Yep. Go.
So we have a couple of options, in color space. We have tons of options, but 2 of them are, HDR and SDR. That would be high dynamic range and standard dynamic range. And really, that's going to give us high dynamic range is going to open that color space up to us a little bit. You get a little bit more, exposure level. So you can get your higher, brightness. It's kind of fun. You'll notice if you're watching on your laptop or something like that, the rest of your screen suddenly goes dim and then all these things are like blinding you. That's your higher dynamic range. And you also get more color accuracy as well. So you, especially in some red areas, that can really open up you get million or billions of colors instead of millions, or I'm sure one of you guys know the numbers.
Yeah, I feel like Geoff should be answering this question.
Yeah,
not Tyler.
I tried to push it, and you were like, no, double down. That guy knows. I'm like, sure.
Right. Well, I mean, so there are a number of different implementations, different flavors of HDR or high dynamic range. The one that's meant for live events, live production is called HLG, stands for hybrid log gamma. If you have a recent, HDR capable television and you maybe watched the Olympics, recently, you had to do a lot of research if you wanted to be able to see it in HDR and in 4K and with multi-channel sound, right? Because the standards that govern these new formats, they exist, but they're very inconsistently implemented throughout the industry, and these are a part of a group of standards that are known as Rec 2100. ATSC 3.0, so-called next-gen TV. The infrastructure in North America doesn't really allow us to do that. Many of the streaming providers are in a better position to do that. But one of the easiest platforms to make that happen on is YouTube. And that allows, a church, an organization, that you wouldn't typically think to basically do an end run around the giant media companies and get to a cutting edge, maximum image quality format, really the maximum available, without, the resources and the infrastructure that you would typically associate with, needing to be able to do that. It's really kind of a special thing, to go out, in HLG and have your laptop, your mobile device, your HDR capable television automatically go into that mode and have the lookup table, dynamically change the look and follow the amount of saturation and the amount of highlight brightness that can be, those formats can bring with them.
So Chad, practically speaking, we've just got 2.5 minutes left. Practically speaking, how has that transition towards HDR? I believe you guys were one of the first, if not the first, to be broadcasting in HDR every week. What have you learned over the last year or two of this journey? How has HDR changed your workflow, and maybe what's been one of the biggest challenges that comes out of that?
It's changed the workflow in which we actually look at the shader as probably next to directing it, the most valuable player in the game. Challenge wise, I would say just finding that balance between HDR and SDR, because not everybody's devices or what TV they watch on can do HDR. And so the hard part is, okay, we actually took a look. So we primarily stream on YouTube. And so we took all the data, all the analytics, looked into it, said, okay, about 90% of our audience is actually watching on a tablet or a phone. So let's kind of steer it that way, right? So we focused on HDR while still trying to find that balance with SDR. And, it's a great experiment. So we're still trying to find that sweet spot, with HDR and SDR. And to be quite honest, we're getting close. We're getting close. And with the live LUT, honestly, the live LUT has completely helped us out to actually get a little bit of a better SDR feed. But yeah.
I think that's one of the things that has been most exciting to me about the live color grade workflow that you guys describe, is how much easier that makes HDR to be able to, in the early days of HDR, I mean, for Pete's sakes, 2 years ago, when we were looking at HDR for transformation, you needed $10,000 processors per feed in order to handle the HDR to SDR conversions and all those sort of things. And a lot of that has massively simplified now, right?
Well, I think shooting in log is like really unlocks a lot of these possibilities, both for live color grading as well as for simultaneous treatment and conversion to both SDR and HDR, because log is an umbrella format that you can derive all of these other subformats from. And it's the same reason why, big movies and big episodic streaming TV shows shoot in that same format, is because they're going to have to create, an enormous number of deliverables. And there's no way you could do that unless you had a format that you could derive all of those others from. Like the metric that I use to scare people is that for Avatar 2, there were 1,065 distinct versions of that movie that all had to be ready on the same day so that it could open as widely as it did and, make all its money back. But that workflow benefits, the fully color managed workflow benefits everyone at any level, really.
Everyone, can we thank our panel today? Thank you guys for joining us. Like I said, there is actually a lunch break here at the stage for the next hour or so. And so I think we've planned this where you guys are going to stick around for a little while, right? Because we've maybe just started to peel the layers off the onion in a real quick conversation. So why don't we kind of organize this, that Chad and Isabelle and maybe Geoff, from a director standpoint, if you're curious to ask some questions about, from a directing standpoint, from a creative standpoint, why don't you guys plan that you'll kind of post up over in this area? And then if you're interested to continue the conversation with them, kind of head over this direction. And then Austen and Tyler and Geoff Smith, more from the creative director, more from the technical. If you have some questions, again, we've thrown out a bunch of things, and just for sake of time to not spend the organized Q&A time, let's do it a little more one-on-one. Why don't you guys plan to kind of head over into this area? And if you're interested in chatting with them, head over that direction. And, thank you for joining us.